So, hello and welcome to the Modelkit Stuff Christmas build for 2022, which you're viewing now in 2023, but there we have it. This was the build I did over Christmas. Started it just on the run up to Christmas, and as you've seen, this focus is going to focus on using enamel paints and airbrushing enamel paints, because I've had lots of people asking about how you go about doing that since I did an enamels sort of product review. So the kit we're using is Airfix's new tool 172 Spitfire starter set, and as I've already explained, it's actually a very accurate kit but with a very low part count. So it is aimed at being very easy to assemble for youngsters and people new to the hobby. The instructions are really very clear and have been redone to make them more accessible to the absolute beginner. So they're not quite the same style that we've now got used to in terms of Airfix's new format, but they have more colour, and there's a little bit more in depth in the instructions, so telling you exactly where to put the glue and so on. And I found the instructions easy to use, but then I like Airfix instructions anyway. So the usual process to start off. I'm using an emery board there just to tidy up the parts. There's 3 sprues in total, and you've got the option for the gear down or the gear up, and I ended up going with the gear up option because I was going to put it on a stand, I don't know what it is, but when the gear's up, for some reason, it makes it look like the aircraft can go faster. Don't know what that is, but there you go. So, carefully cleaning up the parts. The sprue gates are not a problem. The connections are well thought out. The most simplified area of the kit is inside the cockpit, where effectively you've just got a seat. You've not even got any dials. There's no decals to go in. And there wasn't any real paint instructions for that area either. So after we'd removed the sprue gate nubs, we needed to go around and remove a little bit of seam. It wasn't bad at all, and the kit is nice and crisply moulded, so there wasn't really any issues other than the standard cleanup of the parts. So we're just cleaning up the seat here, and as I said, there's nothing much else other than the seat in the cockpit. It mounts on a little pillar, but there is a pilot, and once you've got the pilot in, to be honest, you can't see anything below his waist anyway. So for the beginner, if you're putting the pilot in, it looks perfectly good when you're done. Once you put the seat on, then you can put the two fuselage halves together. So how this works is that the lower wings, as you can see, are in one piece. They mate up to the fuselage once it's been put together, and then you've got the two separate upper wings that go in. So here I'm just cleaning up some of the areas that had been given a file. So we're using a little bit of liquid poly glue there just to get rid of any fluffy plastic scrapings and the like. Now I had intended to mix a little bit of white with Humbrol 78, the green that's used for interiors, but my enamels were, well, my enamel 78 was no longer with us. So I've ended up using the MIG acrylic on the inside, which I brush painted just for expediency. And whilst that was drying, I turned my attention to the stand, and the stand is really, really lovely. Just like their other new tool starter set, the Red Arrow, the stand is designed to look like a silhouette of the aircraft. So you get this, if you paint it black, which is what I end up doing, you get something that looks like the shadow from the aircraft. So it's a really nice idea, and actually on the Red Arrow, you can pose the Red Arrow on that stand because it fits into the engine exhaust, whereas on the Spitfire it's fitting in where the light is in underneath the aircraft. So you've got two positions you can put it in, sort of straight or banking to one side, which is what I ended up doing. The stand is really simple to build. It comprises of just two parts, and when you've put them together you can glue that in, and it's ready for paint. Nice and simple. Before we can put the two fuselage halves together, we have to put in the little mechanism that allows the propeller to rotate. So it's two parts, and when you put them together, it leaves a little gap that fits within inside the casing of the fuselage. I couldn't quite get the two together, probably my fault, not the kit's, but I couldn't quite get them together, so it was a bit sloppy, meaning that the propeller had a bit of droop, so I ended up gluing my propeller into place anyway. But you can see here that gap should be half of that. Once the two fuselage halves are together, you've then got to fit the section of fuselage on the nose above the engine, which in this case also includes the exhaust. So the exhausts and the cover of the engine are all one piece. So quite a bit of cleanup was required on this, just to remove the seams in all those exhausts was a little bit tricky. If you've not got a seam scraper like me, then just get in with the back of a craft knife. So it's a little bit time consuming to do a good job of it, but it's still just basic cleanup, nothing wrong with the kit. Dry fitting the fuselage, I found that I had a little bit of a gap, but just scraping the paint off the surfaces that we were going to glue completely resolved that issue. So the fuselage fit was really good actually. There was a little bit of flash witness around one or two of the female parts of the pin locators. So just giving it all a bit of a sand, removing the paint, and you should find you'll have no issues with the fit whatsoever. So I was trying out a couple of new glues on this build, and we were using the precision plastic glue from Deluxe Materials here, and I have to say it's pretty much the same as the Contactor Professional from Revell, although I did find that the flow was a little bit more controllable. You can squeeze the bottle, which seemed to give you a little bit more control, and it was slightly slower flowing. But I couldn't see any difference in terms of the needle. It seems to be the same diameter and what have you. So the viscosity of the glue is slightly different. But it went down really well, and the curing time was not dissimilar. So all in all, a good like for like. Like I said when we were opening the packet, there isn't a lid on it, which probably is okay, but it worried me a little bit, so I've ended up putting a contactor lid on it. It doesn't particularly fit, but it just keeps the air out a little bit. The fit of the two wing halves is really nice. It's keyed, as you can see here, so to misalign it you'd have to really work at it. It just slots together very nicely indeed. So you can see here my chosen method this time was to just peg it together and then run some liquid poly in just to get it all together. Fit was really nice at this point. So the other glue that I was trying out on this build was Plastic Magic, which is the liquid poly sort of Tamiya quick setting equivalent. And interestingly, I got this towards the back end of the Anson build, and I'd noticed while building the Anson, which is the new harder Airfix plastic, that my adhesive drying times were out a little bit, taking a little bit longer with my extra thin and extra thin quick setting. So I had a little bit of play with this, and certainly the Plastic Magic, I think, had the edge on it. I will do a full proper product review once I've played around with it a little bit more. The other thing that I really loved about this, which you can see me using right now, is it comes with two brushes. There's one in the cap, like a traditional bottle of liquid polycement, but there's also a separate brush which is extra long and has a very fine brush point, much thinner than the brush in the lid of the bottle, and that was great for pinpoint accuracy on some tiny parts, and I really liked it. In fact, I'm really enjoying the Plastic Magic glue, and it could well be replacing my Tamiya glue, but I want to do a little bit more work with it, comparing the two glues before I make a final decision. But I'll soon be ready to buy some more Tamiya adhesive, and I want to know which way I'm going before I do that. Let me leave you with a moment of gratuitous gluing action. So fitting the fuselage onto the wings, although straightforward enough, was the first time we had an issue with the kit. The fit was quite sloppy, and there was a sizable gap at the wing roots to the fuselage. So we were going to have to do some filling. The concern was making sure that we had everything straight. So as we've already mentioned, the wings are keyed, so there was no way you could fit those wrong, and carefully lining up the underside of the wings and the fuselage meant that we had quite a sizable gap, more so on one side than the other as well, interestingly. So, and I'm talking sizable, it's not hairline gap. So if you're building this kit, you are going to need a little bit of filler. So that effectively is our build done. As certainly as far as we're going to go before we put some paint on it. We'll keep the propeller separate, and it's separate to its stand. We've got the pilot to paint and the canopy, which is in the instructions. It says don't glue it, it just sort of clicks into place. So we can paint that separately as well. So the next step is I want to just leave this to dry. So it's taken me a couple of hours to put this together. So next thing is to let it all dry, and then we're going to deal with the gaps. You know, it's a starter set, so it's been designed to be easy to build. So some of the fit is slack, shall we say. So a little bit of filler in some places just to get it up to where I want it to be, and then a little bit of sanding in places just to get it presentable, and then we can start our process of painting. And I need to make a repair because I've managed to snap the tip off the aerial radio antenna there. So got that to do, which will probably be my next job. But that's where we're up to. We will paint the stand. I like the idea of the stand being painted black so it looks like a silhouette. And when you mount the aircraft on it, as you can see, it shows you the aircraft on a turn. So it's got quite a nice look to it when it's in place there. So yeah, all good. So the plan is get the filler done, and then we can start getting our airbrush out and our enamels out and having a bit of a play. This is gonna be a lot of fun. Right, we are ready to start painting, and we're going to use enamels for this build. So we're ready to do the base. We want to do the base black so it looks like a silhouette. So for that, I'm going to be using this Humbrol enamel 33 matte jet black. It's quite an old paint this. I've had this quite some time, so it's going to need a little bit of thinning. We'll talk about that in a minute. What I want to do is just talk about the basics of airbrushing with enamels from my point of view. At its base level, it's no different to airbrushing with acrylics. You're going to thin your paint, put your paint into your airbrush, spray with your airbrush, clean your airbrush. Essentially, it's exactly the same. What does change is some of the chemicals that you're using in your airbrush, and that can change how your airbrush is going to perform over time, depending on what sort of airbrush you've got. Now the airbrush I'll be using is this Infinity CR Plus. It has PTFE seals, which means that I can put enamel paints and the associated liquids through there without any concerns whatsoever. Now, to be honest, the enamel paints themselves aren't the big issue, it's the cleaning. So when you come to clean the airbrush, you're using typically something like white spirit, and that can be quite aggressive towards your rubber O-rings and things in your airbrush assembly. So that's why this is handy, because it's got the PTFE seals that will stand up to that. But I do have a couple of tips if you've not got a more expensive airbrush and you fancy having a go at airbrushing with enamels. So let's just start at the very beginning, and the beginning is that we need to mix our paints, and much more so with enamels than acrylics, and it is important with acrylics obviously that you shake your paint and give it a good mix, but with enamel paints especially, because of the way they settle, it's not good enough to give them a good shake and you're done, or put a steel ball bearing in and a shake and you're done. You really need to mix them, and you really need to mix them with a good paint stirring device. So this is a Master Tools paint stirrer. Badger do one, I think Trumpeter do one. They're all pretty much identical, so buy whichever's the cheapest. It's a basic battery powered tool. It stirs your paint. It's as simple as that. So for enamel paints, it's essential they've had a good mix up, a really good mix up. If you've not got one of these, then a good stir with something like one of these Tamiya paint stirrers, but we're talking several minutes of stirring so that you're convinced that it's all mixed in and an even consistency. That's your starting point. Happy that your paint is mixed and you've decanted some into your palette, you then want to thin it for the airbrush. Now, I'm not going to say there's a particular ratio you should do. Enamel paints especially can change their viscosity over time. So it's really about getting it to a consistency so it'll flow through your brush, and that just comes with experience. For me, I'll be using the Humbrol enamel thinners for this particular job, but you can use white spirit with no issues at all, and obviously you can get low odor white spirits, which helps with all the vapors and things in your room while you're painting. But for me, I've got the Humbrol thinners. That's what I'm going to use right now for thinning that. So that's how we're going to deal with the paint. I'm also going to mix in with the thinners, I'm going to mix in some of this. This is called Slow-Mo Extender Medium. It's from VMS, and basically, if you think of it as a flow improver, that's sort of what it is. The idea of it is it slows your drying time of your enamel. Now, I know that might sound like an odd comment. I'll come back to that in a sec. But it helps with reducing tip drying. So a little bit of that in with your thinner. Treat it as part of your thinner mix, like you might do an acrylic paint where you put some thinner in and some flow improver. You know, it's that sort of process. So when we put a little bit of this in, it just helps slow down the drying time of the enamel. Now, a lot of people don't like to use enamels because they believe that the drying time is slower. And what I would say is you need to think about enamels in a slightly different way. There's a drying time and a hardening time. And if you separate the two, then you can view enamels a bit differently. The drying time is actually quite quick. And in the same way as you can force dry acrylics by blowing air through your airbrush, you can force dry enamels in exactly the same way. And what it does is it dries the surface, which allows you to handle. What it doesn't do is harden it. So if you imagine it's got two layers, and it's like custard going cold. It forms a skin which becomes dry, and then underneath it's still sort of jelly-like, and that dries much more slowly. So you wouldn't want to put masking tape on it for a minimum of 12 hours, 24 if you can, but you can handle it and it can be touch dry and you're not going to damage it actually fairly quickly. And that's why you can sometimes get a little bit of tip dry, because as the air is going through there, especially if you're doing delicate close-up detailed work with your enamel paint, the air going through there is going to force dry the paint on your needle, and that's going to give you problems with paint splatting and difficulty with the flow. So it's always good to have a little bit of white spirit in a separate palette that you can dip your brush in and just clean your needle. But just adding a little bit of that helps as well, and it's not a guarantee it's going to stop it, but it should reduce how much of it that you get. So that's my first little tip. When it comes to cleaning the airbrush once you're finished, which I think a lot of people perhaps get anxious about, the same cleaning process that you would do with acrylics pretty much applies. You want to put a little bit of thinner through, mix your paint cup with a brush and some thinner to thin down the paint further, and then you can put white spirit through as a more aggressive cleaner, or you can put some of this through. Airbrush Cleaner Standard. Again, this is a VMS product, and it is aimed at cleaning airbrushes after you've had enamel paints through it. The beauty of this product is it cleans effectively, but it's less aggressive, particularly on your seals. So if you've not got PTFE seals, this will really help with cleaning your airbrush and extending the life of the seals. It's also very, very low odor, so that also helps with the whole process of painting with enamels and cleaning. So You can put some of this through, you can put white spirit through. For me, thin it all through as much as you can. Take the paint cup off and clean that with a little bit of white spirit, because white spirit's a fair bit cheaper than this. And then take your needle out and give that a wipe with a bit of white spirit. Wipe everything down with a rag, a bit of a cotton bud, reassemble it, put some of that through, make sure you're nice and clean, ready for your next job. I tend to leave mine unassembled so that the air can get in and dry and you don't have any liquid trapped in there. But that's my basic process. So with all that said, let's paint that stamp. Right then, let's start by getting our paint mixed and thinned, ready to go. Oh, it's pretty thick at the bottom. I can pull big chunks of it out, so it's going to give it a big stir to start with and get it all off the bottom, loosen it all up. Then we can put this on, and what we're basically going to do is start from the bottom, make sure we've got it into all the edges, and then as the chunks start breaking down, we can lift it up and move it around a little bit. Before I do that, something I should have done, which I've not, is get my tea towel down underneath. So let me just go and do that. When you're mixing with an electric paint mixer, you've got a risk of paint splattering, especially when you're working near the top of the tin. So I like to just have a tea towel down just to protect my surfaces a bit. Off we go. You can hear how really under pressure the motor is. It's really struggling. When the motor's running fine again, that's when you know your paint's mixed. Okay, once you think you've got your paint mixed, then we can decant some into our palette. We're not going to need too much, but as always I will overdo it. There we go. Okay, so put the lid straight back on, and you notice that I didn't shake the tin before we started mixing it. All that does is get paint all over your lid, and you're much more likely to get a mess of both your tin and your work surface. So we press it down, and then once it's pressed down and we're holding it tightly, we can turn it upside down, and that will just make sure it's all nicely sealed. So that's our paint dealt with. We now need to clean our paint stirrer, and to do that, all I do is give it a whiz in some white spirit. Okay, we're ready to thin the paint. So we're going to use Humbrol enamel thinners, but I'm going to start by putting in the slow-mo extender medium. So you can see it's got a nice little dropper, and we'll just put 2 drops of that in, and that gives us a starting point. And you can see that is way too thick to put through the airbrush. So using a pipette so we can put in a drop at a time. I know we're a million miles away, so we're going to start with 2 drops, expecting that we'll need at least 4. There's not an exact science when it comes to enamel paints, because the thickness of the paint can vary depending on age. Not even depending on age really, because you can buy them and they have different consistencies, and how well you've mixed the paint and so on and so forth. So it's about getting something that looks right. And I know people talk about the thickness of milk, but milk comes in different thicknesses as well. So I've never found that an easy guide. What I like to do is just wipe the brush on the side, and if the paint quickly goes down to the bottom, you know you're nearly there. And we're not right now. Now if I was brush painting, this would be about right, or maybe even a little bit thicker. So the point I'm making is that when you're putting it through your airbrush can deal with the paint being a bit thinner. So that seems fairly slow running. A little bit more. I think we're nearly there. Enamel paints go a long way because they do need a fair amount of thinning in my experience. Okay. Okay, I think that is thinned nicely. So again, just some white spirit, give the brush a bit of a clean. We are ready, so let's just put the thinners away. So the paint is ready to go in the airbrush, so we now need to get ready for airbrushing. Okay, so getting ready to paint. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put a little bit of white spirit in this palette here, and that's just going to be used for any cleaning that we might need to do during the process. So you can see I don't need to put much in, but we'll keep the bottle and the pipette to hand. It's unlikely that we'll need any more, however. And we'll keep a little brush there, and what we can do is dip the brush in the white spirit and just clean the tip if we need to. Our airbrush is ready to go, so we can decant our paint into our paint cup. So simply going to pour it in. Every last drop in. Okay, we can put that to one side. And we should be ready to start painting. So, I like to take my protective cap off, just so I can get to the needle better. It's actually not too difficult to get in with this cap on, but it's still not easy. Just check that everything is finger tight before we go, and then I like to get a bit of cardboard or something and check that it's okay. Now, I have got my mask with me and I will be putting my mask on, so we'll stop talking in a moment. I'm also putting my extractor on. So it's going to get a bit noisy. Let's see if our airbrush is flowing first. Air first, and then pull back to get our paint. Yeah, lovely, no problems with that. So, let's get going.
And we're not trying to put it on like we're spray painting a wall, we're just putting it on in a light layer and then building up the colour. I'm just going to use a bit of white spirit to clean the palette. So you can see all I've done is put a little bit in. I've taken, you know, a tissue, but you can use a rag, whatever, and we're just going to wipe that round and get most of the paint off, and then we can get our white spirit that we only needed to use once. And there you go, that's our palette clean. Sorry, I've still got my mask on because we're about to spray. But rather than putting white spirit straight into here, we're going to use a little bit of this airbrush cleaner. So what we'll do is we'll pour a bit in and spray it through. So I'm going to use a pipette to put it in. And the first lot of paint going in there is just going to get mixed around the cup just to help clean the cup. And then as we spray it through, we'll keep stirring. Let me put my mask back on. So we can now take the cup off. Give it a wipe. And we're ready for cleaning that a bit more deeply in a sec. I'm just going to clean the thread. Like so. And then again, going to use this cleaner Okay, extractor's off, so hopefully you can hear me a little bit better. So I want to just finish cleaning up a little bit. You can see we've got paint on the top there. So a bit of white spirit on my tissue. And we can just rub that off. There you go, that's perfectly clean now. So we'll put that to one side. And we'll do the same with the paint cup. So just a little bit of white spirit on our tissue and wipe it around our thread. If you're struggling to get in, use a little cotton bud, whatever you need to do. Put in someone with a brush to get in the thread there. I know that's all nicely wet again, so I can just get in there and wipe that off. Inside of our cup appears to be clean, but we'll give it a wipe out. That's our paint cup clean. Bit more white spirit, and I'm just going to now wipe out the top of the thread where the paint cup goes in. That all appears to be clean now as well. So even though my compressor is still on and the air hose is full of air, with my quick connector I can take that off like so and put that to one side to make it easier to handle my airbrush while we just finish the cleaning. So I'm going to take the back off so we can get to the needle, and we're going to take the front cap out, so that just twists off like that, and loosen the needle locking nut and push the needle through, and you can see we still have some paint residue on that needle, which means we've still got some paint in the chamber. So again, a little bit of white spirit. This time I'm putting it on my tea towel. Hope you can see that. Yeah, so just putting a little bit on my tea towel, and then I can run my needle through that, get any paint off. There you go, my needle is clean. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put my finger over the end of the airbrush here, and I'm going to put a couple of drops of the airbrush cleaner in, and then with our brush I'm just going to mix that around in the top there and push that down into the hole. That all looks clean from this point of view, so let's just take my finger off. Some of that can come out then. So that all looks good. Yeah, my cotton bud is fairly clean. So I'm going to use a little brush. We're going to dip it in a little bit of white spirit and just give that a rub through. We can see that's coming all the way through. So that's darkening a little bit, but not massively. Just make sure we've got it in all the threads. Now I'm probably overdoing this, but I rather overdo it than have bits of paint causing me a problem when I next come to airbrush. Okay, so I'm fairly sure that we are clean now, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to dip my clean unused cotton bud in some white spirit and just go around the back edge, the corners, anywhere that we might have missed, and wipe that through. You can see there's a little bit of paint come off. Back in with our tissue just to rub anything out. There we go. So we haven't needed to do a full strip down, it's just been a partial strip down. We can put our needle back in now.
we're just going to lock that in while we deal with painting, cleaning the nozzle. There's no paint on there, so that's clean and okay. So same process. I'm going to put my finger over the end of the nozzle and drop some white spirit in, and then using our little brush, give it a good twist round. So that's all good to go. I'm going to put the top on my white spirit, even though it's low odour. It's just good practice. Let's reassemble our brush now, and then what we'll do is we'll put a bit more airbrush cleaner through it, and then we know it's nice and clean. Okay, push our needle to the front. There we go. Put our needle protector back on because we're not in use anymore, and paint cup back on, and then we can connect it back to our airline. Yeah, all good and working. Okay, I want to just put a little bit more airbrush cleaner through. Again, it's overkill, it's belt and braces. It's just the way I do it. There you go, we have no paint in there, so we're nice and clean. So I'm happy that that brush is clean. That is how I airbrush with enamels. It's not dissimilar to what we do with acrylics, is it? And whilst we were cleaning the brush, the job that we painted has pretty much become touch dry, and if we wanted to force dry it with just air, we can do that in the same way as you do with acrylics. What I would say is, just because it's touch dry doesn't mean that it's set. So if you're going to be masking or something like that, you need to leave it a little bit longer than you would do acrylic paints. But for me, that is done. I've got a nice finish. In many ways, I get a better finish with enamels, or that's not quite right, a more consistently good finish with enamels than I do acrylics. And you can see our spinner here, we'll have to mask the tips off to spray the centre bit, but we basically can use that a bit like a primer. Okay, so we have a little bit of filling to do on this, tiny amount really. The biggest issue is the joint at the wing roots, where it doesn't quite come together. Most of it I've been able to do with my Vallejo plastic putty, which is basically for hairline cracks really. You just put a bit in, wipe it straight away, and it fills it. So I always think of it as a bit like bathroom sealer. It's that type of thing. It doesn't go hard, it's not really great for sanding, but if you want to just fill something very quickly, like we've done there and there and there, it works really, really well. But for the wing roots, we need something a little bit more substantial, so I'm using Humbrol model filler for that, because that's nice and sandable, and it's a hot filler, which means that what it's basically going to do is slightly melt the plastic and form a nice strong fill that we can then sand away. So I'm going to just put a little bit in, and then we'll clean it up. I like to make sure that I pressed it into the gap, so I'm just going to use a toothpick, just make sure I've got it nicely into the gap. Otherwise, if you've just put it in at the top and you've not filled all the way down to the bottom, you can find sometimes when you're sanding it, it breaks away and what have you. So Want to make sure that you've got the gap nicely filled, even if that means you're putting some more on. There we go. Try and keep it as tidy as we can. There we go. So we need to just keep building that up until we're happy we've got that filled. Sometimes a sanding stick's just not going to get you where you need to be. So a little rolled up bit of emery paper solves that problem. Can't quite get in there with this without wearing away parts of the plastic that we don't want to wear away. So always worth having some different grades of sandpaper, emery paper about. Okay, that's not perfect. We're going to have to do a little bit more work on that. And we are losing the panel lines a little bit. So what we can do is take our little razor saw and just, before we lose the panel line altogether, just go in there and scribe it back in. Just deepening that up just helps make sure we've still got a panel line and it doesn't disappear. Okay, I'm going to get on with sorting this out. What we'll do once we've sanded this back is we'll put some more in and we'll keep going until it's done. Right then, about 8 hours ago we put down a primer. This is just an ordinary primer that I'd use for acrylics. It's an acrylic primer. Doesn't matter that you're putting enamel on top of it. So we did, as you can see, a grey prime and everything sort of as I want it for this build, which is really showcasing enamels rather than anything else. And then about half an hour after that, we put down our enamel matte 64, which is the colour being used for the underside of the Spitfire and the spinner, as per the box instructions. And that's gone down really nice. It's not perfect in terms of the build, prep and what have you, but this is really about showing you what you can do with enamel painting using an airbrush. So I'm not so worried about that, but we have done some tidy up and got the worst off effectively. And it's a starter kit, so it's aimed at simple builds and getting people sucked into the hobby rather than being a technically excellent model. But we've done that, and we've painted the spinner, and when we painted the stand, we did the propellers, and the spinner's now been done in the same underneath grey. So the propeller, in terms of base painting, is done, so we can put that to one side. So what we want to do next is put down the Humbrol Matte 106 on the top as our grey base before we put the green camouflage pattern on. So I just want to mask off what we want to protect. So I'm using some previously used, pre-loved masking tape. I always use it 2 or 3 times if I can. It just, it just keeps costs down and what have you, and you'd be surprised how many times you can reuse it. So we're just going to mask all of this off. The important bit being this area here along that panel line on each side, because that all needs to be covered off. And you can see that we've been able to paint up to the panel line. It doesn't show out extend really well because of it's grey primer, but you can see that we have painted up to that panel line fairly accurately with the enamels. So it doesn't behave any differently than acrylics, but for me it just goes down a little better. Anyway, right, with that said, we are going to get some masking done. So let me get my masking knife, and we might need scissors potentially. Not to throw everything around. Okay, so I'm going to start by tackling that area there. We'll probably do that with some smaller strips initially, I think. Obviously, it's not quite a straight line. So what we can do, in fact, I'm not sure, yeah. So we just follow the knife in the panel line and allow that to trim away anything that's gone over the line, so that our masking tape is nice and crisp where we want it. So that's our front bit masked off. I'll get the rest of it masked off now, all the undersides, and show you what that looks like before we start painting.